Shalom Aleichem. This is Ann Tobak. I'm the CEO of the Workers. Hi, this is Ann Tobak. I'm the CEO of the Workers Circle, and I'm pleased to be welcoming all of you to this financial check-in. Just to start, I wanted to give everyone an update on what's happening at the Workers Circle. Today, we are proud to be the leading organization in the fight for worker rights and demanding democracy. All of our activism is rooted in our founders' Jewish values and ideals. We also are so proud to be featuring the largest Yiddish language program in the world. And we continue to expand our Yiddish programming to connect people to our Eastern European cultural heritage and traditions. This year, we're going to be introducing a comprehensive Yiddish song website. And we're really excited at the end of this fall to be offering to the world our a comprehensive place where you can download Yiddish song materials, ultimately upload interpretations of Yiddish songs, and we'll be also introducing a Concerts Connected. We have a trip to Yiddishland that's sold out this year. It has a waiting list this August in Hopewell Junction, New York. And just not to shortchange our activism, our activists, our college students, high school students, and people of all ages have been live on the front lines in Alabama, in Florida, in New York, in Washington, D.C., and across the country. This past week, our social justice director, Noel, was part of the plenary panel speaking on democratic activism at the League of Women Voters National Conference in Colorado. We're organizing college students, high school students, and people of all ages to live our values and fight for our democracy today and into the future. And we do it also building strong community rooted in our deep Jewish identity and inspired by our Yiddishkeit heritage. A few times a year, we're very pleased to be offering financial check-ins as a service to help our members and friends plan their retirement accounts and to learn about the changes to options available and related legacy giving options being considered by Congress. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our expert presenting today, Jonathan Gudema. Jonathan has over 22 years of experience working with and advising nonprofit organizations and their donors on planned gift arrangements and tax-advantaged charitable estate planning options. Jonathan's a member of the New York Bar, and he serves as in-house counsel to a family wealth office where he's overseen over $500 million in wealth transfers since 2007. In 2011, Jonathan launched Planned Giving Advisors, where he provides consulting services to nonprofit planned giving programs while continuing his work at the Family Wealth Office. Jonathan's also the author of the Planned Giving blog, which provides news and commentary on the field of planned giving with over 1,700 subscribers and 175,000 visitors since its launch.
Potentially Mr. Phillips.
I'm going to ask everyone to please mute so that we can all hear Jonathan. And now it's my pleasure to turn the program over to Jonathan Gudema.
Okay, everybody just hold on while I bring up my presentation. Okay, all right, I want to thank everybody. Again, some of you may have seen me before. We've given these presentations every once or twice a year. We've been giving presentations on related topics to estate planning, elder law, elder planning, retirement planning. And today's session is really focused primarily on IRAs and retirement assets, and also touching into annuities and some charitable options regarding all these potential vehicles. Okay, so just before I get going, I just want to mention there is a chat feature. And if you put the scroll above the top part of the screen, you should be a little drop down. You'll see chat. So you can ask a question during the presentation. I'll actually get notified. and I might stop and read the question, or we can wait till the end and we should have a little time and you can put a question in the chat at that point or unmute yourself at that point. But please stay muted during the presentation. That's the best way that everyone will be able to hear. Okay, so let's get going. Again, it's about 45 minutes of material, maybe a little less. We're going to talk about IRAs and retirement accounts. A lot of this you do know about this, but I just review some of the basics and some things you might have missed, and some of the interesting opportunities, but also some interesting challenges that these types of accounts present to individuals. I'm going to talk a little bit about Roth IRAs. I'm not a real expert on Roth IRAs, but just want to make sure you understand what that really means and what the opportunities are. Maybe that's something you want to consider. And we'll talk about the tax-free IRA rollover giving and also putting charitable beneficiaries on your IRA accounts and other retirement accounts. A little bit about commercial annuities. And finally, we'll talk about something called charitable gift annuities. And when we get there, I will give you that description of what that is. Okay, so IRAs and retirement accounts. Okay, so all these monies I'm talking about the pre-tax contribution. These are standard IRAs and what's called qualified retirement accounts. So when we say pre-tax, it's very important that the term really is very descriptive of what it is. These are funds that are when you put money into your IRA, you get a tax deduction. You get what's called above line tax deduction. It's essentially, let's say you put $5,000 into your IRA this year, then you're removing $5,000 from your gross estate. Gross your tax from your tax return. Sorry, mixing up different topics. So that's basically a complete income tax deduction. So what that really means is it's not that you'll never be paying taxes on it. What it means is that, right, they've given you an incentive. They say if you put money into your IRA up to a certain amount, you will get, we will take that off your taxes, and that's basically a complete tax deduction. But there's a caveat, which we'll get to in a second. Just want to hit that home. So it might come from you put money directly into your IRA, or you might do a typical paycheck withholdings, money going to a 401k or 403b plans or other similar plans at work. Again, all the money is not going to be taxed. And so that's essentially the equivalent of a full tax deduction. And the great part of, and by the way, eventually 401ks and 403bs typically roll over into your IRA. But I always caution people, that's usually you hear, well, of course, once you leave a job, you want to move over the assets into the whatever's in your 401k or 403b or other retirement plan typically is rolled into your IRA, but not necessarily. And there are actually some advantages to keeping some funds in your 401k or 403b. My mom, for example, her last part of her career, last 20 something years, was with a workforce development organization, a part of a governmental job. So she had a 403b plan. And when she retired, she left her funds in there. And the one advantage was they did a very nice job in terms of the investments. She liked the way the investments were offered to her. So it doesn't, hasn't hurt her at all, even though she's well past retirement. And the other thing is at some point, if you want to dip into now she's older, let's say myself, when I left the job, I had a 403b at one of my jobs. I worked for a hospital foundation. And when I left, I had a certain amount of money in my 403b. And I was looking to borrow some money for one of my children's bar mitzvahs. And I actually found out that I could take a loan against my 403b account. And what that meant was I just borrowed $5,000 and I actually paid back with interest my account, which was kind of cool because essentially it was a forced savings plan. I wasn't going to lose money from my retirement plan. I'd put it all back plus the interest would be adding to it. And actually, so that was kind of a neat plan. So typically your IRAs don't allow that. So I'm just putting it out there. If you have 401k or 403b, sometimes there are advantages to keeping it in those plans. But typically people, once you hit retirement age, you've left those jobs, typically they are rolling it into their IRAs. You're not forced to, but for organizational purposes, it seems like usually a good idea. And the whole idea is, and the main interest is that not only you're avoiding taxes, but it's not going to be any taxation during the growth any growth until you start withdrawing money, there's no taxes. So, I've heard people, they talk about this. I'm not a math person. I mean, I guess I was pretty good at math. I basically became a tax lawyer. So I guess I could have been better in math. But there are those who I've heard are real math people, and they're just obsessed with compound interest. And I had one of the top tax lawyers in the country as a guest speaker for one of my webinar programs. And all he talked about was this compound interest and really trying to take advantage of it. And so it is special, meaning if there's consistent growth in an account where, for example, I was in the early 1980s, my dad told me, if we put $2,000 into an IRA for you, I do it myself, starting in the early 1980s, by the time I hit, a certain age and with some basic growth, I'd easily have $1 million in there, even though I was only putting $2,000 a year. And so that's great. But the problem is that, and this is what people have found out with IRAs, is that compound interest in your IRA or other retirement accounts, I just made this up, the great train robbery. Meaning to say, there's nothing wrong with paying taxes, but all these large IRA accounts, if you've been successful and if it's grown to be quite a bit, because again, you're adding money hopefully every year, and then it's growing, hopefully, there's no guarantee there, but you're not paying any taxes on any of that. So it could actually grow to quite a bit of money. But 100% of it is taxable upon withdrawal. And that's really become an issue for people. The government does want you to save for your retirement, and they've actually taken steps in recent years to encourage more savings. But you have to realize that you are creating a big taxable account. And so we'll talk about today some of the options for reducing that. If that bothers you, if you don't mind that, then you're partnered with the government. And then as the money gets withdrawn, you'll be paying income taxes on that money, or your heirs would be paying income taxes. But I do have some good ideas. So the bottom line is that when it comes to these accounts, they are very important for individuals who are younger to set aside those funds, even if, at the end of the day, if it grows a lot, the government will get whatever the tax rate applicable to. It's about 20%, by the way. I've crunched numbers. I know there are tax brackets out there. It says, oh, you're in a 25% bracket, or a 30 or 28% bracket, or 30-something% bracket. But actually, when you crunch the numbers, the actual tax rates are in the upper teens. That's basically what you're paying on your income. So anyway, so that's basically, so if you want to look at the government as a partner in your IRA or retirement accounts, they'll be basically getting 20 to 25% of it if you don't do anything charitable with it, or you don't use it obviously during your life. Okay, so one of the key aspects of all these accounts is what's called the required minimum distribution. Again, I'm assuming most of you are familiar with this. Again, it's the amount you're required to take out every year. They have changed this. It was 70.5. You have to start taking it in the year following your birthday, your 70.5 birthday. Now it's 72. You have required minimum distributions. It's based on your life expectancy. It's not if you take the absolute minimum, which a lot of people do if they don't need the funds in their account, and if they don't need the funds in account for their daily living, they usually wait and see. But by end of the year, you have to take out the RMD, and then so it starts now age 72. Now there is some legislation proposed. It's actually some of the few things that both sides, Republicans and Democrats, actually agree upon, that they're actually going to push it even to older ages, which is actually nicer for individuals, because usually when you're at the early 70s, you may not need take out the funds. You'd rather push it off till you have lower income as you get older. So waiting till I think it's going to go up to age 75 is when the required minimum distributions kick in. That's something that's being thought about and may happen within the year or so. So once you hit age 72, you have a deadline each year to take out the RMD. Each of your companies that you work with, Fidelities, wherever your retirement accounts are, they'll let you know what you're required to take out. And you do want to take it out on time. You don't want to miss that. On your first RMD, you can wait until April 1st of the year following age 72, but otherwise you got to take it out during the calendar year. And if you miss it by the annual deadline, you actually, the penalty is equal to 50% of the amount not taken on time. So let's say you were supposed to take an additional 10,000, then you actually have to pay a penalty of 5,000, which is pretty onerous. So just to put it out there, you have to take your RMDs one way or another. And if you continue working past age 72, you still have RMDs from your IRA. However, you may qualify for just some exceptions to having to take an RMD if you have a current workplace savings plan. Let's say you're still working and you have a 401k or 403b or some sort of small business account. The conditions are, if you're still, number one, you got to be still working. Number two, you do not owe more than 5% of your business that you work for. So if this is a small business and you own more than 5%, it's not going to work for you. And three, if you have a employer-sponsored retirement account with the business you work for. So these are some of the conditions. They don't always, not that applicable. Worst case scenario, once you've hit 72, even if you're working, you should go ahead and just plan on taking your RMD, or I'll give you a couple of options. If you don't need those funds and you'd rather do something charitable with them, I have a good idea for you in a couple slides. Okay, so IRAs and retirement accounts, some practical issues. Do you automatically roll over your 401k, 403 into your IRA when you leave your job? Again, I talked about that already. So advantages of rolling into the IRA, again, is, well, you control, when I say control your destiny, you're controlling the investments completely. If your 401k, 403b programs usually have set investments that you can choose from. And let's say you want to just do it completely on your own, you don't want to choose one of their options. That's great. Like I said, for my mom already, it was actually much better because the options they gave her, she could choose to be a little more aggressive, not so aggressive, more conservative, and actually was really good. She's done extremely well in terms of that retirement plan. That's a 403b, and it's still in there. So again, controlling your destiny is also full choice of investments, which is sort of the same thing as controlling your destiny. I guess controlling your destiny is you control which account you let's say you want to have your retirement accounts at Fidelity, other places like that. So again, if you move into your own IRA, you can choose where you want to put that. But the advantage of keeping into 401k, 403b is, again, they have good investments. There's plan loans. Again, I had such a good experience with the plan loan. I always like to tell people that's a small thing they didn't know that could be applicable to you. It could be a great opportunity. Now, if you're under, for example, obviously I was under 59 and a half when it came time to my eldest child's bar mitzvah. And it was a really nice, really cost-free way to borrow money against my own retirement account and then pay it back over I think it was a 5-year payback. Okay, just wanted to give you, just to show you the contribution limits. This is the maximum amount you can contribute to these different types of accounts. You can see the 401k, 403b, it's up in 2022, it's up to $20,500. There is a catch-up. They do allow what's called the catch-up phase. So if you have some reason to you didn't save enough, you might be able to do what's called a catch-up. I actually not even that familiar with it, but it's an additional $6,500 that you could be putting in. And then you have a traditional IRA or Roth IRA. We'll talk about Roth in a second, but that's a $6,000 limit. And there's a catch-up provision. If you catch up, I think lies when you're older. So when you're a little older, when I think you're over 50 and you want to add more to your IRAs, they do allow what's called a catch-up. And that's an additional $1,000 for your traditional IRA or Roth IRA. And these other IRAs, you can see they're more your own plans. If you're a small business, you might be able to put quite a bit more in. But I have not really worked these types of IRAs, so I don't want to try to tell you anything about them because I'm not that familiar with them. I just know that they're basically small workplace retirement type plans. Okay, so recent changes to IRAs, it's not that recent. There's already been few years, but when it comes to changes in tax law, people are not always paying attention. It's just always really important to get a review of them. So even though if you've heard me before, I keep the last couple of years I've been talking about these things, but I think it's just really important to keep hammering home that there have been some changes. You can no longer leave your IRA to an heir besides a spouse. Of course, you can always leave it to a spouse, and then expect having the heir withdraw it over the life expectancy. What this was, and this was a key aspect of many attorneys' plans for their clients who had very large IRAs, and they were concerned about the taxation, as I've already mentioned, it's all taxable income tax, and it could even be estate tax, depending on your wealth, of course, or the state you live in. So they promoted what's called the stretch IRA, which basically means instead of leaving your IRA, let's say $1 million IRA or a really significant IRA, instead of leaving it to your spouse who may not need it or may have their own IRAs, leave it to your child or even grandchild, and they would get the younger recipient would get to take it out over their life expectancy, which from those people who are obsessed with compound interest. So even though they're paying taxes as they withdraw the money, but they're paying it over a much longer period. And so this was the big solution in the planning world for large IRAs that you want to leave to your heirs. Just leave it to younger heirs and they get to take it over life expectancy, but they've gotten rid of that. They've changed that. They've made a new rule. And the new rule is only a spouse or anybody within 10 years of your age can inherit your IRA and then be able to withdraw it over the life expectancy. There's some exceptions, but I'll just send you again. You're just looking at if you're thinking about who do you want to inherit your IRA. Spouses, very typical spouses usually set it up so that each other would receive their IRAs and then just roll it. Whoever first passed away, it would be rolled into the surviving spouse's IRA or somebody within 10 years of your age. For those younger children, grandchildren, or others, they have a 10-year window to withdraw the IRAs. Now, what is that? Why would they do that? Well, if it's a large IRA, then it'll be, let's say $1 million IRA. Well, then the recipient will have only 10 years to withdraw it. And obviously all that money is taxable as it gets withdrawn. So, and you can either wait till the end of 10 years or you can spread it out over 10 years. It's up to your choice. But it's a much bigger, it's a very big difference from the previous stretch IRA plans. And if you had done a stretch IRA, if you had done the planning with the assumption, my IRA is going to go for the next generation or maybe grandchildren, you might want to think about it, because then not only they're not going to get it, there was a lot of what lawyers were doing, because the other question is, why would you want to put a large sum of money at the disposal of a young person who may not be ready to use that? So what lawyers came up with was various trust entities, and these trusts would prevent the recipient from taking it out all at once, and they would just be basically force the recipient to take it out over the life expectancy or whatever conditions you could put on these things. But all this stuff really, if you had done any of this type of planning, you have to revisit it because it's all obsolete at this point, or it's changed to the point where you definitely want to start over again. Now, if you have a minor who inherits an IRA, they get 10 years from the age of 18. So you basically get to age 28 if you're a minor inheriting an IRA. That is to withdraw the funds. Again, every cent of those funds will be taxable, but at the rate of the recipient. So if it's a minor, so once they hit age 18, they can start withdrawing funds. They'll just be taxable at whatever tax rate that individual is at that time. And again, the RMDs have been moved up to 72. And I'm mentioning they're likely to go even higher. And there's actually just an interesting point if it applies to you. They took away what's called the age limits. There was once you hit age 70 and a half and older, you change from someone who could add to the IRA to someone who now has to withdraw from the IRA, and you can't add any more. Your IRA is sort of locked up at that point. You couldn't add any more funds to it. So now they've changed it so that if you're still working, you have to have earned income, which means you have to be working. If you're still working past age 72, you could actually put in up to $6,000 into your IRA, which is kind of interesting because you have required distributions. Let's assume you don't have one of those exceptions. You could be putting money in, and you could be withdrawing money as required. But you could also be putting money in. The advantage is that you would get the tax break. You'd be delaying taxes on any money you put into your IRA up to $6,000. I mentioned this point to my dad. It doesn't really work, but he does some consulting here and there. He's in his 80s. And he throws kind of interesting idea. So, I actually, in the end, I don't think he did it, but it was something that he might have done maybe 10 years ago if he had the option. Put more money into his IRA. And the proposed changes again. So they've been looking to, again, this is actually bipartisan. It's hard to believe it, but there is something bipartisan out there. And this is one of them. This is one of the few things that both the House and the Senate have been looking and likely to pass what's called a catch-up provision, allowing people who are at certain ages, who are age 62, 63, or 64, starting in 2024, they can start adding more money into their 401k, or more money to going into these what's called simple plans, other type of retirement plan. Again, catch-ups is again allowing you to add more money when you're a little older. There's a Senate bill that was going to have an even more generous catch-up provision, with applying to people age 60 or older. And they're going to change the RMDs. They're going to change the RMDs that they wouldn't start until 73 until next year. Again, I'm not sure this will get passed this year, but this is not that far-fetched because again, it's a bipartisan thing. And then then age 74 in 2030, which is already kind of far off, and 2033 age 75. But I don't, when I see proposed tax laws that are talking about 5-10 years out, usually they're pretty meaningless. So what's meaningful is that if they do change it, it might bump up next year to, if you wouldn't start your RMDs until you're 73. Oh yeah, well, the Senate had a little more aggressive bill, but there's a little different approach. But again, trying to move up the RMDs until age 75 by 2032, and then waiving it for individuals with less than 100,000 aggregate retirement savings, which is kind of interesting. Actually a nice point for people, as well as reducing the penalty for failing to make the RMDs to 25% from the current 50%. Yeah, I don't like it. I kind of get bothered. It's just a pet peeve of mine when I see pretty onerous penalties that the government sometimes applies. Obviously, the government wants you to take the required minimum distribution, and if they don't put any power behind it, then people just avoid doing it, and they'll pay a little tax, but they'll figure out that it's probably better for them not to take it. But an onerous tax, a 50% tax, it seems very onerous. So that would seem to be a good idea. Again, all these things are two bills that have been floated out there. And I suspect something will happen on this front before the end of the year, but there'll be a combination of these, some sort of compromise bill will be developed. Okay. In law school, one of my hobbies was drawing political cartoons. I sort of a little bit of a drawer, and I like to do things. So I always like to find funny cartoons. So, I really, what I would have done with this cartoon is I would have changed it. It says, and I only had to pay tax on the seed. Meaning, usually it's more like, if I'd only done this, I would have only had to pay tax on the seed and not the tree. That's really what the Roth IRA is about. So what is the Roth IRA? All right. So, well, the Roth IRA, I think maybe everybody understands this. Instead of the funds being, quote, pre-tax, and again, there'll be no tax benefit, but if you put money into a Roth IRA, or somehow can roll over IRA funds into a Roth IRA, the Roth IRA would finally give you the tax-free compounding interest, the eighth wonder of the world, whatever they say. So the downside is you don't get any tax incentive for money into your Roth, or in fact, it's a disincentive if you want to convert current IRA money into a Roth. You have to pay income tax on all of it. But actually, look at the picture carefully. Again, this is, if you do a Roth IRA early enough and it grows, 100% of the growth will be tax-free during your life, and your heirs would get tax-free. So it's considered really one of the, there's a lot of the tax avoidance things out there. Roth IRAs is one of the best still standing options. And there are some out there that are being, the IRS will eventually shut down, or Congress will shut down. But Roth IRAs has been considered a good idea. It's not real tax avoidance, and it's smart. So if you're able to put money into a Roth IRA, earlier the better, of course, or convert IRA money into a Roth IRA. But again, the caveat is you have to pay income tax and all that on that conversion. But if you're able to do it, take a look at you're only paying tax on the seed, not the whole tree. For a regular IRA, if I cross off the word Roth here, this is my IRA, they would be like, you're paying tax on the entire, you planted it, but you're paying tax, you're going to pay tax on the entire amount. So this is a very big incentive for individuals. Just some basic estate planning. A Roth might be a nice way to leave a tax-free. Well, there are a couple of good things for it. Number one, there's no required minimum distributions, so you can draw as needed. You're not forced. There's no timeline. And then with tax-free withdrawals during retirement. Basically, once you're past after age 59 and after 5 years of holding it, so there's no penalties. No, if you follow those rules, you're basically leaving a tax-free sum of money to your heirs. And if you're looking for, again, tax-free flexibility in retirement, many people like that idea. Again, I could tell you most people, as during their working career, they're happy putting aside money for their retirement. But then when they get down to it and they're looking at it, I know this, I deal with my mom quite often. I say, well, you've got all this money in your IRA, use it. Oh, but I don't want to pay the taxes on it. I say, yeah, but it's there for your retirement. Don't worry. But again, it bothers some people. So if you want tax-free flexibility, and Roth is one way to go. And again, tax-free nest egg for heirs is the main reason for doing it. Now, I'm not going to go through these. This would be time-wise, would not be good use of our time. And I've never done this before. There are a bunch of different ways that if you get enamored with the Roth IRA idea, and once you get it, if you study that picture of that tree, you might realize, wow, as hard it is to do it. I recommend, then thinking about it now. How would you get money to a Roth IRA? That the limits you might not even be qualified to. So the direct, look over your direct Roth IRA contribution. I believe it's probably for 2022. It's also 6,000, and the income levels you have to be under 140,000 for individuals, or under 200 something for married filing jointly. So your income can't be above these amounts, or you can't add anything. But that doesn't, how far are you going to get with 6,000? Let's say you qualify for 6,000. You're not going to get far with that. So there are all these different ways to get more money into a Roth IRA. Conversions. So let's say that's the main one, a 401k or IRA conversion. It's a taxable event though. So every dollar that will be leaving your IRA into now your Roth IRA, it'll all be taxable. But so there are these are a couple different ideas. If you're thinking about the idea, hey, yeah, I really should do a Roth IRA, and I don't mind paying the taxes on it now, because I know that there'll be hopefully growth in the future, and why not do it? You have to talk to one of your financial advisor, and they might have some ideas for you on how to get this done. You could talk to your accountant also. But just so you know, there's several ways to move your IRA into a Roth, not just the standard way, which has some limits, too many limits on it. Okay, so I've been hinting at this, but I wanted to now talk a little bit about tax-free IRA rollover giving. This has been the law for a while now. I was part of a group that was always lobbying Congress to allow this, because so many people would, depending on the nonprofit I was working for, I worked for the Anti-Defamation League. I remember very clearly in the early 2000s, people were reaching out to us saying, I've got $1 million in my IRA, how do I give it to you? But I don't want to pay taxes. And there was no way to do it. So finally, Congress did finally pass a law. They finally made it permanent. It allows individuals to make direct gifts from an IRA to Workers Circle or other worthy charities. It's directly out of the IRA. It's a nice tax benefit if you're no longer an itemizer. 90% of U.S. tax filers are no longer itemizers. So if you haven't really thought about it, you could, your accountant does your taxes. Ask your accountant, are you an itemizer? The standard deduction now is over $12,000 per individual, and you may have no need to itemize. So if you're not itemizing, your charitable contributions are nice, but you're not getting tax benefit from it because you're just falling under your standard deduction. this is a nice way to get tax benefit if you're no longer an itemizer, or if you're holding more IRA funds that you need for retirement. A lot of people were very diligent in putting aside retirement accounts, and then they realized, wow, I built a really huge nest egg, and I don't really want to share it so much with the government. Again, that's something to think about. Or you don't need the RMDs. Now you have to take the RMD, but you have to pay income tax as you withdraw it. But if you don't need that income, they don't need the RMDs. The tax-free rollover giving allows you to give it to charity instead of having to take it yourself. So number one, you have to actually reach your half birthday, 70 and a half. So if you're close to that and you're thinking about this as a way to make it it could be an annual gift, or it could be a large gift. It could be really anything you want. You'll see up to $100,000 as the maximum for a year. So you have to be 70 and a half and older. It's got to go directly from your IRA account to the charitable recipient. And there are forms at your IRA plan. Administrators will say, hey, I want to make a charitable gift for my IRA, or IRA rollover gift, or QDC, qualified charitable distribution. That's another technical term for it. They'll have forms for you, and the funds will go directly to the charity, to Worker Circle, to whatever charity you choose. $100,000 per year is the maximum you can do. So if you're thinking really large gifts, you could do it over multiple years. But I don't want to say 100,000. Right? It could be any size gift. So it could be $1,000, could be 10,000, whatever you want. It could be, and if you decide, those RMDs, I don't need them, or you didn't take them because you didn't need it for income, you could make that as a charitable gift, and then you would not owe any taxes on your RMDs. Or if you've taken your RMD already, but still want to make a gift out of your IRA from, you could do that too. And again, you would be no income tax on it. You don't get a new tax deduction, because by not taxing it is equivalent to a full income tax deduction. So just keep that in mind. And then other things, once you're thinking about charitable ideas, legacy giving ideas from your IRAs, something to consider if you're thinking about a legacy gift for a nonprofit, for Worker Circle or any other nonprofit that you really care about. IRAs and retirement accounts are excellent options, or excellent alternatives to say a standard will, or let's say a living trust. Because again, the same issue I mentioned, that all the pre-tax money, it could be whenever it's withdrawn, if it's withdrawn by a non-charity, meaning any individual, whether it's yourself or your heirs, it'll be all taxed. But if you decide, you know what, why not leave some of this to a charity, then the charitable recipient will not be paying any tax on it. And so that's a nice, so I guess what people like myself in this in the planning field, and we talk to individuals, if you're thinking about a bequest for family, for example, and a charity, think about designating the IRA or other retirement accounts to the charity upon your passing. Again, it's just a beneficiary designation, and then leave other assets in your estate to your children or other heirs, which won't be taxed anyway if it's at this point less than 11 million in your estate. So you have to, once you get the 11 million mark, then you can talk to attorneys about what to do. But most people are not facing estate taxes. Yeah, and so no income taxes then will be charged to the charitable recipient, which is a nice advantage. And the non-tax estate funds can just go to family. That's really what people have been doing. And most of the plan gifts that I work on do typically involve these types of beneficiary designations. There's one little fact I ran into a couple years ago. There is something called IRA restrictions, and it really depends on the plan administrator. But you could set up your IRA. You could set up an IRA so that an heir has access to, for say, the income or to a certain amount of the principal during their lifetime, and then remainder to the charity, which is actually sounds like a charitable vehicle. But so that is something out there. You have to look at you have to contact whoever who's handling your IRA, Vanguard or Fidelity, or whoever, and see if they have any restrictions. So that's another thing you could do with your IRA. You could leave part of it to family, but with some restrictions on it, and then the remainder to charity or to other family members. You could also even use an IRA to fund another planned gift like something called like a charitable gift annuity, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is income for life of the person you choose and the remainder to the charity. Again, I'll show you what a charitable gift annuity is in a second. Okay. Okay, so what are commercial annuities? I know I'm going kind of quick. We're about almost 45 minutes. We have a couple of minutes, and it will, at the end, we'll stop and you can throw out some questions if anyone has questions. But just, there's a lot of confusion about commercial annuities. It's an insurance product, basically. It includes a wide range of insurance, I call insurance-like products. Basically, insurance companies or investment companies, combination of them, offer these. A lot of different versions of them. A pure annuity contract, which is basically means exchange of a certain amount of money for guaranteed lifetime income. I call it the reverse of a life insurance policy. It's what's called a single premium lifetime annuity contract, where you put up a certain dollar amount and the company guarantees you income for as long as you live, a fixed dollar amount. That is a pure annuity contract. Now, most of the commercial annuities are a little more complex than that. They offer different options. A lot of them are basically very similar to an IRA, but usually you're funding it with after-tax dollars. So you're putting in, let's say you put $100,000 into a commercial annuity and has a certain growth rate. There's certain investments going on, and at some point, so the growth in the commercial annuity, that type of commercial annuity, is treated like an IRA. There's no taxation during the growth period. And then when you come to withdraw the money, you could create what's called a lifetime annuity to yourself, and then any taxable funds, anything, the after-tax dollars of funds, that's the funds that will be not taxable when you draw it, but any growth would be taxable. So then you could set it up, either you can withdraw money and pay taxes on all the taxation part of it immediately, or you can create an annuity for yourself. You can choose what's called annuitize, and you get payments for life, and then the taxation part will be spread out over the rest of your life. So that, but there are a lot of complexities there. Just the big knock on commercial annuities, just from my perspective, is the fees. So a lot of times they're making guarantees. Well, if you do this annuity, you're going to get certain amounts of growth, and everything's going to be fantastic. But there are fees, and to get out of them, typically it's actually kind of costly. That's usually the big knock on commercial annuities. So you have to really know what you're doing and what you're getting into. And I always just recommend talking to an investment advisor who is not selling you the annuity. That's probably a good way to avoid some of the problems. You don't get a tax deduction for putting money into a commercial annuity, but again, you're funding with after-tax dollars. And when you get then whatever you funded with, that you won't get taxed double for that. You'll come back to you as tax-free return of principal, but the growth will be taxable. And again, the growth is tax deferred, which is very nice. But again, as we know, it's deferred. But when you start taking out, it's no longer deferred. And if you depending on how you could be subject to penalties in terms of withdrawals if you try to take it all out too fast. Again, you really got to know what you're doing, get yourself into. Just beware, when people who are in the insurance field, financial planners, sometimes they're a little short-sighted and they try to get you into something. They say this is going to be great, but then if you later on, a year or two later, you're like, I don't really like this. But you just know you have to know what the cost would be to get out of it. You want to know that before you do it. Again, so I mentioned already, the taxable income, as you start taking withdrawals, the taxable part, anything that's growth will be taxed first, unless you create what's called annuitize. That means you've chosen at that point to spread out whatever's in that annuity, spread it over your life expectancy. And again, they'll spread out the taxation over that. It won't all be charged up front. Okay, the last topic of today is charitable gift annuities. Because I'd like to put right next to each other commercial annuities, now charitable gift annuities. What are the difference? So actually, a charitable gift annuity is a single premium lifetime annuity contract. It is a pure annuity contract. Essentially, it's charities in the insurance business, but there are a lot of restrictions, a lot of regulations, and a lot of limits. So it's not the same as going out and buying a commercial annuity. Basically, everybody is offered, depending on your age, how much you're putting in there. Everybody gets the same rates. and the same program for everybody. So the issuer is a charity. And you're going to get a partial income tax deduction, though. So that's different than the commercial annuity. Commercial annuity, you put after tax dollars in, you get no upfront tax benefit. A charitable gift annuity, you're going to get a charitable income tax deduction for about 40%, sometimes up to 50% of the value of what you're putting in. Usually, let's say $100,000, you might get a deduction of about $40,000 to $45,000, depending on your age. And you could also fund these charitable gift annuities with appreciated stock. What I mean, bypassing capital gains. So let's say you had $100,000 of stock, which had a low cost basis, which is a low purchase price. Let's say you pay $1 for it, and now it's worth $100,000. There are ways that it works out that way. You could put that entire $100,000 into a charitable gift annuity, and you would not pay any capital gains upon the funding of the gift. What would happen, though, is the capital gains you avoided, the part of it would show up in your 1099 each year over your life expectancy. So that's why we say we didn't say avoiding capital gains, we said we bypass the capital gains. But that's you're getting income for life based on the full value and not the loss of taxes. If you sell a capital gains property, you might be giving over 20% of it in taxes, 20% of the gain in taxes, depending on where you live. As I'll show you in a second, I'll show you an illustration of charitable gift annuity. The annuity, part of the annuity stream is actually tax-free during your life expectancy. And whatever's remaining of the gift principal after the passing of the income beneficiaries is a legacy gift, is a gift to the worker circle. And we've done these for the worker circle. And here's a picture illustration. Again, we've got, you have a donation of something, usually a check, could be securities, stock. They're going to get back a fixed income, flat annuity, same amount each year for your life, or you and another person, and they're going to get income tax deduction, and the remainder comes to the charity. And it's I like the phrase, you actually may increase income because the rates are actually very favorable to individuals, and you get deduction, and you avoid some capital gains if that's applicable, and you're investing in the mission of the charity. And here's just a simple illustration. 20,000 is actually the minimum if you're going to go ahead and try to do one of these things. So let's say individual with 20,000 cash. The age is important. The rate tables are standard rate tables that are designed for this particular program. And so let's say you're age 73. When I did this illustration, these rates do change every now and then, but I'm 99% sure it hasn't changed since I set this up. So age 73, the rate currently is 5.1%. That's a fixed annuity rate. So a fixed annuity on 5.1% basically means on 20,000, you're going to get paid $1,020 a year. It's usually in quarterly payments. That's just the way this works. This illustration actually set up actually annual payments, but could go either way. It could be could even be monthly payments. But in this case, of the 1,020 that the individual is receiving, 767, basically over 70% of it, is tax-free for the first 13.8 years. That's the individual's life expectancy. And so that's a nice benefit for doing one of these gifts. And here's a second example of a deferred gift annuity. So what I did was I put in here a individual age 73, but the payments aren't going to start until 2025. So there's a 3-year deferral. So the payments go up. So the rate goes from, it started at 5.1. Now the rate is going to be 6.1, which is a nice jump in rate if you don't need the income right away. And the deduction is similar and the tax-free is similar. But you just, again, it's a nice way to get a higher income stream, wait a few years, and so your payments will be a little higher. And this is just a sample rate chart. This is from something called the American Council on Gift Annuities. They work on these rates. They work with an actuarial firm to make sure the rates are safe for both the donors and for the charities that are issuing them. And these are one life, just sampling of different one life rates. Again, they may go up, right? As interest rates, federal interest rates go up, they may make these changes, but they change it only once a year or so. And so we haven't seen any changes recently, but there may be soon it changes. They may increase these rates because the federal rates are going up also. And here are the 2 life rates. Again, less obviously because they're joint life annuities. And again, these are just samplings of potential rates. Okay, so let's just wrap up. Okay, so number one, you should be taking advantage of what's called tax deferred IRAs or other retirement accounts. Build a retirement nest egg. But just do it in appropriate amounts, meaning you don't need to over invest in this. I mean, if you're hit a certain point where you realize I've got more than enough in my IRA, then you might be wiser to, instead of putting more money into your retirement accounts, put it into other types of investments. Because what's nice about the IRAs is it's tax deferred. It can grow a lot, but the downside is it's going to be taxed as withdrawn unless you think about one of these charitable options. Again, either direct IRA rollover giving or perhaps a beneficiary of the account to a charity, to the Worker Circle or other charity. And I think it's a good idea to think about the Roth IRA or Roth conversion. If you haven't thought about it, what you could do is you could coordinate your Roth conversion, which basically means you're going to add, let's say you have $100,000 you want to put into a Roth that's already in an IRA that you have figured out how to roll it over into a Roth. It'll be $100,000 of taxes. So maybe as they coordinated with a special charitable gift, the charitable gift would be there to start offsetting the taxes of the money going into the Roth IRA. So just an idea. If you're 70 and a half or older, you should, number one, I hope you consider if you're using your IRA for charitable giving, annual charitable giving, any amounts, because it really makes a lot of sense. Because it's basically the equivalent of full tax deduction, whether you're an itemizer or not. And especially if you don't need your RMDs, you can find out early enough in the year how much RMDs you owed this year. And instead of taking it to yourself, you could take some or all of it and send it to a charity, to Worker Circle or other qualified nonprofit. And I would say, if you're thinking of any legacy gifts, think about using your IRAs or other retirement accounts as listing a charity as a beneficiary, and then leave assets in your estate and out of your will to family. So you could do both. Sometimes I've worked with individuals thinking between both of those, but something to consider in terms of your planning, and particularly your legacy giving planning. And lastly, the charitable gift annuity. I know it's a new idea for most people, but those people who've done it before really enjoy it. They really, because you get a nice benefit, you get guaranteed lifetime income, and you get a nice upfront income tax deduction, and the payments get a lot of it's tax free during your life expectancy. So there are a lot of nice things about it. If you have any questions or any interest in any of these things, I'd be happy to. You can check with the Worker Circle staff, and they can get through to me. But we can create illustrations for you, anything you might need on that. Okay, so I want to stop sharing, and I want to open the chat. All right, so if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in now. I'm looking at them. We will make the PowerPoint available. I'll make sure that the staff has it if you want it. Or if you have any questions later on, you feel free to reach out to the Worker Circle staff, to Melissa or to Jamie or Ann, and just if you have a question, they can reach me. They'll know how to reach out to me. All right, so any questions? Anybody want to unmute themselves and ask a question? That's also a possibility. Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for being part of this presentation. Ann, you have any final wishes?
I guess the final, first of all, is to thank you, Jonathan, and to thank everyone who joined us. I hope you all learned something. I know I was pretty interested. I have some new ideas about my retirement savings. And if, it looks like, okay, it looks like someone's putting in a comment. If you're interested in being in touch with us, the easiest way is to send an email to info@circle.org and just indicate what you're looking for. And as Jonathan said, we can always be in touch with him and We would love to answer questions or help you in any way possible. The other thing is I want to encourage everyone to go onto our website, circle.org, and look at events. We have lots going on at the Workers Circle, and we'd love to see you all at other programs as well. So thank you all for joining us.
One more thing, I'll look at I see the comment there. Very nice, interesting comment. Yeah, that is definitely a factor. There's a comment there about was a socially aware investing. So places like, I only mentioned Fidelity because it's just on top of my head. I don't recommend them necessarily, but the only one I can remember. So yeah, this is interesting. People, you could take a look at the that website there. That's a good idea in terms of thinking about your investments, maybe thinking about how it's invested. Now, one last question here. After your calculated life expectancy, is there a tax deduction in charitable IRA gift? So I'm not sure about that question. Maybe reach out to me separately. I think I'm mixing two things up at the same time. Again, if you're giving from your IRA to a charity, to Worker Circle, just the fact that you're not being taxed on that money coming out of your IRA, that's your deduction. You know, that's not, you will not get a new deduction on your tax return. But that's it. And if, let's say, you're not an itemizer anymore, that's actually a nice benefit because, you know, of course, most people continue to give whether they're itemizers or not. There's never been a correlation that less itemizers, less giving to charity. Just people give because they care. But they might as well use this extra different source of money, get some tax benefits, but you will not get new deduction there. And then in terms of life expectancy, that was with the charitable gift annuities. Oh, I mean,
here.
If you live past a certain age, do you get an annual tax deduction? Yeah, so that's a good question. If you outlive your life expectancy, again, it's almost like a random thing because it's to use national life expectancies. Once you outlive the life expectancy, then you don't get the tax-free anymore. It becomes all ordinary income. So that's a good question that you asked. Thank you, Rhoda. Okay.
And you know, at the Workers Circle, we live very long lives. It's always been the case. You know, 97 years or higher is our typical average.
But we're willing to do these annuities, and we've done them before. And Hadassah also told me that too. Hadassah has a very big program, and they told me the outlived life expectancy by far also. So.
And just to let everyone on the Zoom know, one of the reasons is when you turn 97, we stop charging you annual membership fees. So we're pretty sure that becomes an incentive. And so stick with the Workers Circle, live a long and happy life.
Okay. Anyway, thank you everybody again for staying to
thank you.
And
take good care and have a good holiday weekend. Be well, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.